Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Yesterday, in the opening segment, we just went through a bunch of different wins. Starting off the week, starting off Monday on a high note, and there's one in particular, one of those wins in particular that I want to go into more detail today because it is a big one. Huge decision from a federal judge in San Diego, where I live, San Diego, California. The judge ruled that California's assault weapon ban from 1989 is unconstitutional. Now, yesterday on my radio show, we talked to the lawyer who argued this case, and he told us what's happening next. It's going to go up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We can guess how that's going to go. But then it could go to the Supreme Court, of course, if they decide to take it, and that would be a wonderful thing. The decision in its entirety, it's a work of art. Please read the whole thing on MikeSlater.locals.com. We threw it up on our website, MikeSlater.locals.com. I've been in the Second Amendment fight for a long time, and there are arguments for the Second Amendment that I've never heard before that this judge brought up. And there are things that he said that rebuked the anti-gun people that also I've never heard before. It's a beautiful thing that this guy did, this judge did, MikeSlater.locals.com. In this segment, I want to share 5 arguments, maybe 5 of the best. There's some in there I'm sure I probably missed even, but 5 of what I think some of the best arguments that this judge made for the Second Amendment and in his ruling that this assault weapon ban is unconstitutional. 5 arguments. First, the AR-15 is not a machine gun. So the Supreme Court back in Heller, 2008, the Supreme Court said yes. Okay, the Second Amendment does not guarantee a right to keep any weapon whatsoever for whatever purpose in any manner. Okay, that's what the Supreme Court said a decade or so ago. Now, people on the left have taken that to mean, oh, well, therefore we can ban any gun we want. And this judge says, no, that's what he said. He said the banned assault weapons in California are not bazookas, howitzers, or machine guns. Those arms are dangerous and solely useful for military purposes. Instead, the firearms deemed assault weapons are fairly ordinary, popular, modern rifles. This is an average case about average guns used in average ways for average purposes. In other words, the AR-15 is not a machine gun. Stop acting like it is, and therefore the AR-15 does not qualify as one of these exceptions to the Second Amendment. That's the first argument. Second, more people are killed by knives and fists than by rifles. The judge goes off on the media. He says, do not be fooled by endless media coverage of a nation awash with murderous AR-15 assault rifles. He says, let's go to the facts. Let's find the true story. According to FBI statistics, California, murders by knife occur 7 times more often than murder by rifle. You see there, 252 people killed with a knife, 34 killed by a rifle. He says a Californian is 3 times more likely to be murdered by an attacker's bare fists than by his rifle. And the same pattern can be observed across the nation. Third argument. Well, so what do we got so far? So the AR-15 is not a machine gun. More people are killed with knives and fists in California than any type of rifle, not just the AR-15. Third argument. Don't be deceived by scary language. I love this line. He says, back when we were starting to pass these, there's a bunch of different laws that kind of all come together as an assault weapon ban. They keep passing more over time. It's been incremental, right? It started in 1989. But in the early 90s, Pete Wilson was the governor of California, and he vetoed one of these bills. He was a Republican. He was a Republican governor of California. We used to have a lot of those. And he vetoed one of these assault weapon ban bills. And he said, if the bill's focus were high-speed sports cars, well, first the left would declare them chariots of death, and then criminalize possession of ramblers equipped with racing stripes and wire wheels. That's so good. He said these prohibited guns in California, like all guns, they can be used for ill or for good. But clearly the left has called them assault rifles for a reason. He said they could just as easily be called home defense rifles or anti-crime guns. Can we please call them that now? Can we please call AR-15s and guns like that heretofore known as home defense rifles? Where are you going, honey? Oh, I'm going to the store to buy another anti-crime gun. Don't fall for the left's game anymore. Don't let them control the language like that. Assault rifles. No. It's a home defense rifle. It's an anti-crime gun. Oh, you're against home defense? You're against anti-crime? You're anti-crime? Weird. It's great. It's beautiful. Fourth argument that he made many, but just picking 5 here, just to whet your palate, get you to the website to read the rest. He said it's good to have a more accurate gun. So the argument from the left, so these anti-gun people, they're banning all the different add-ons and attachments to the AR-15 platform that make a gun more accurate, like a pistol grip, for instance, right? So these things, the left says, make guns more accurate, and they don't want mass shooters to be more accurate. That's what the left is saying, right? And the judge says mass shooters don't care about accuracy. That's not their priority. They're just firing into a crowd in a dark movie theater. They don't care about accuracy. You know who does care about accuracy? A law-abiding citizen defending his family. A mass shooter is going to fire as many rounds as possible into a crowd of people. The home defender, which is the vast majority of uses of this gun, and he mentions this in the case. I think he said the number of home defense uses, and it's a big range. We're not exactly sure, but it's somewhere between 900,000 and 3.7 million home defense uses every single year of a firearm, right? So the vast, like ridiculously vast majority is personal protection and home defense. Those people, so again, the mass shooter wants to fire as many rounds as possible wherever is possible. The home defender wants to put as few rounds as possible, as accurately as possible, in order to eliminate the threat. So California's goal of making a gun less accurate just hurts law-abiding people. Love it. Fifth argument. The left uses this line, I've heard this a lot lately, last year or so, that these are weapons of war, and people should not be allowed to own and possess weapons of war. And I love the judge's rebuttal to that. The judge's argument is, yeah, they are weapons of war. So, here's what he says. Second Amendment protection includes both common arms and weapons that may also be useful in warfare. He's like, yeah, they're useful in warfare. So, what's your point? They're also very useful in home defense. So that's 5 of the very many wonderful arguments that this judge made. Again, MikeSlater.locals.com. So the true story is the AR-15 is not a machine gun. More people are killed by knives and fists. Don't be deceived by scary language. It's good to have an accurate gun. And we want law-abiding people to know how to use weapons of war. It's part of having a well-functioning militia. That's what well-regulated means. Regulated back then did not mean regulations. It meant well-functioning, properly functioning militia. You want people to know how to use weapons of war. Therefore, that and many other reasons, the California assault weapon ban is unconstitutional. It's beautiful. So let's take this to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible, where I imagine the Supreme Court will decide accordingly. Thank you, President Trump, for that. So go buy yourself some guns and go get yourself some food and emergency supplies. They're all in the same category, right? It's all in the same category. You want a closet full of guns and ammunition, and you want plenty of food for the next who knows what, right? Natural disaster, viral pandemic, hack of the water system. I mean, like who knows what the threat is and when it will come. I'm protecting myself from that, but I'm also protecting myself from other people because people lose their minds. A couple years ago, we lost power here in San Diego for like a day, and it was all fun in the beginning, and I was like, oh, is this fun? Everyone went outside, I was hanging outside. And then it got nighttime, and people were starting to run out of food, and then you go to the gas station to get some ice, and everyone's a little like, we're kind of running out of ice here, right? And luckily it ended, but you see this thing goes on for just a couple days, and people start to become animals. So the best way to ensure your survival and your staying away from people freaking out is get an emergency stockpile of food, and you get that from My Patriot Supply. And also, you can't help others if you're stranded yourself without any food. So get what you need now before the next, whatever crash, disaster, panic happens. My Patriot Supply, millions of families, myself included, over a decade, 39,000 4- and 5-star reviews, stay fresh for 25 years, and no other emergency food company comes close to 2,000-calorie meals. 25% off your 4-week emergency food kits. Just get it, check it off the list. You save 25%. You go to our special website, preparewiththefirst.com, preparewiththefirst.com in order to save that extra 25%. Preparewiththefirst.com. Coming up next, we'll talk about D-Day, which was a couple days ago, the anniversary of it, and how the Biden administration just didn't mention it. But they did mention some other things on that day. We'll talk about that coming up next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. We start off every show, and same with my radio show. I've been doing this since I was in college. America's the greatest country in the world, and it's important we say that because most people don't believe it. It's also important that we recognize why and who fought to make sure that that remains true. Sunday was the 77th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy, D-Day. I want to talk about that in a bit here. I want to talk about some of these men, but just real quick, just so you know, our president and vice president made no mention of it on Sunday. The press secretary was asked about this yesterday. Here's what she said.
Presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump all commemorated D-Day anniversaries on D-Day, on the D-Day anniversary. Why didn't President Biden?
Well, I can tell you that certainly his value for the role that the men who served on D-Day and the memory of them, the families who have kept their memories alive over the course of years on this day is something the president has spoke to many, many times in the past. It's close to his heart, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's more we would have to say on it.
Yeah, that's just word vomit, right? That's just filling. I have to say a certain number of words for a certain amount of time in order to make it seem like I just answered your question. Now, lest you think he didn't do any tribute on D-Day because he was too busy, Biden did send out this on the 77th anniversary of D-Day. He sent out this nice tweet about transgendered kids. That was on literally June 7th. It was on the 7th. What? And to call that bravery, we seem to have lost our understanding of the word courage. Ben Shapiro wrote about this yesterday. This idea of courage has been, you guys can throw it up, this idea of courage has been watered down. And today it means simply living my truth and demanding your applause. That's courageous of me. Courage is living my truth, doing what I want, even when it's the wrong thing to do. Like there's certain times when you have society all doing the wrong thing and you think you're really doing the right thing, and society will criticize you even though you're doing the right thing. There's also times when society is doing the right thing and you're doing the wrong thing, and society is criticizing you and you take that as, I must be doing the right thing. No. Still you're doing the wrong thing. People are criticizing you because you're doing the wrong thing. Continuing to do the wrong thing is not courageous. It's foolish and stubborn. In many cases, selfish. In many cases, insane, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Now, I think the one worse thing than forgetting our D-Day veterans, or not mentioning, not honoring our D-Day veterans, and as I get to it a little bit here, there's very few of them left and they're not around for much longer. The one thing worse than mentioning them, than not mentioning them, is comparing them to Antifa. You're like, wait, what? How could you possibly compare them to, you're better off not talking about them at all. Brian Williams, MSNBC, he did a little thing on D-Day, and he said, man, if it wasn't our finest hour, it's hard to say what was. And the folks at the Lincoln Project are out there with this reminder for everyone. And then he played this commercial.
Who is Antifa? They stormed the beaches of Normandy, parachuted into the French countryside, and gave their lives to face down and fight back against fascism. They took down Nazi machine gun nests, tore apart the Third Reich's strongholds, liberated concentration camps. It was a war against inhumanity. A war that isn't nice, but cannot be lost. A war we still fight today. Anti-fascism. It's not a cable news talking point. It's an American ideal that should be memorialized because it was paid for in blood.
Hold on. So you're not only equating not equating, you're directly comparing our D-Day vets to Antifa, or Antifa to our D-Day vets. But then at the end, you equate Trump to the Nazi fascists that our D-Day vets were fighting against. Like, that's insane. That's absolutely insane. Let's take a minute here. We got some time before our guests come up to talk about what these men really did, in many cases, boys. There's one D-Day story in particular that I'll never forget. And I had the honor, maybe 10 years ago, to talk to a man who climbed the cliffs of Point du Hoc right before the invasion. These guys, these Army Rangers, they needed to take out these guns that were on top of these cliffs, these Nazi guns that would have just rained down on the Allies who were storming the beaches. If they didn't take out these guns first, then there was no way. It's a miracle that this invasion ever worked at all. And if these guns, these Nazi guns, were still allowed to be on top of these cliffs, and there's no chance that this invasion would have occurred. And we were able to talk to one of these men. I mean, look at those cliffs. How are you what do you mean climb the cliffs? That's impossible. And I asked this guy if he ever has been back. And he said, yep, I've been back before. I said, what'd you do? He said, well, I walked to the edge of the cliffs and I looked down. And I said, there they are. I said, there's no way we did that. I'll never forget that. There's no way we did that, said the man who did that. But he looked at it and recognized this is an impossible task. So here's the deal. They were supposed to arrive to these cliffs in the middle of the night and silently climb up the cliffs before the Nazis could see them or were aware of what was going on. But they were blown off course. So where they landed, they had to then hike over to the bottom of the cliffs where they were actually going to climb them. And by then, the sun was coming up. So it wasn't the middle of the night. They lost their cover. Also, their ropes, their grappling hooks that they were shooting up on top of the cliffs, you saw the rope ladders, they got wet. So they were really heavy. And a lot of them didn't even make it to the top of the cliff. So now, instead of it being dark with a bunch of ways up, it was daytime with few ways up. And you got the Nazis on top with machine guns firing down on them. Like, what? That's impossible. But they did it. And without it, the D-Day invasion on the beaches never would have happened. And even that shouldn't have happened. And the only reason that was even successful at all is because of this diversion tactic that the Allies used, tricking Hitler into thinking that we were ready to storm a different part of Europe. So they sent reinforcements up to this other area, and we juked them out and invaded down in Normandy. The whole thing was impossible. This breaks my heart. We've talked to, on the radio show, we've talked to so many vets over the years. Whenever I had the chance to do it, I always said yes. It was never newsy. It was never timely or urgent or trending or an anniversary. but we would talk to a World War II vet for an hour. And whenever the opportunity came up, I said, well, we have to do it because in a few years, we can't. There will be none left. At the annual commemoration, there was one man, one veteran, Charles Shea. He's 96. He was 19 on D-Day from Indian Island, Maine. It's gonna be awful when there's headlines. You know, there were only 10,000 vets at the commemoration ceremony. And then a couple of years ago, there's only 5,000 vets. Oh, there was only 1,000 vets. Oh, there was only 100 vets. This year, oh, there was only one veteran. It's believed there's only 2,500 World War II vets alive. World War II vets, not just D-Day, World War II. Very soon, we're going to hear the story of the final World War II veteran who passed away. And then what? Charles Shea, he said in France, people who remember these men, they've kept them close to their heart, and they remember what they did for them, and I don't think the French people will ever forget. It's a problem because so many American people have forgotten. And you know, I mean, we talk about education all the time. I guarantee you, if you asked a high school senior, you lined up 100 high school seniors, and you ask them about D-Day, what do you think? 5 of them could tell you anything even vaguely, what percentage of them do you think could tell you about D-Day? And I don't even mean like the intricacies of it. Just even, oh yeah, D-Day, World War II, Normandy invasion. Like that's it. That's all I'd be looking for. I'd be like, boom, you got it. You nailed it. That's exactly what it was. I'm not looking for like an in-depth history report on it. I bet you get 5 out of 100 high school seniors could tell you what D-Day was. So here's this last veteran who was at the ceremony. He says, I don't think the French people will ever forget. And I would argue, unfortunately, I think so many Americans already have. I don't care much for permanency. I don't like permanent things. That's why I'll never get a tattoo. I can't stand the idea of like a permanent thing on me. I'll be like, all right, get off me. The only permanent thing in my life is my love and dedication and loyalty to my wife and kids. That's it. It's the only thing that's permanent. Nothing else is permanent. My job, my car, my house. Like when I bought my car, I was like, okay, it's a big purchase. I'm gonna buy this car, but what's my out? Like if I sold it in a couple of years, how much money can I get back? Right? I need an outward thing. It is going to be really sad. It is going to be weepingly sad when the final World War II vet passes away. And then we place this chapter in our history, in our modern history, into ancient. I want to go back to this idea of courage, though. I want to share this from Rick Moran. He wrote about courage, and he says, too often we use this in such a cavalier way, right? So some Hollywood celebrity has courage because she revealed to the world that she's a drug addict. Like, oh, that's so courageous. Or some comic has courage because he made fun of the president of the United States to his face. Oh, that's so courageous. You have so much courage. And Moran follows up with this. He says, no longer does courage imply sacrifice or a willingness to give all that one has for a cause greater than oneself. Instead, courage defines the selfish desires and overwrought egos of an ideology that sees more irony in the word than reverence. Ordinary men, extraordinary action. And that's courage. And every World War II vet I've ever talked to who's been in a battle like this, they said they were terrified. And that makes what they did all the more courageous. Right? They weren't naive about what they were doing. That wouldn't be courageous if they were like, do-do-do, and like, that's not courageous, that's naive. They knew. And they were terrified. And they did it. How far have we strayed? This is Mara Gay. She is on the New York Times editorial board.
I was on Long Island this weekend visiting a really dear friend, and I was really disturbed. I saw, dozens and dozens of pickup trucks with, explicatives against Joe Biden on the back of them, Trump flags, and some cases just dozens of American flags, which, is also just disturbing because essentially the message was clear. It was, this is my country. This is not your country. I own this.
Lady, it was Memorial Day last weekend. It was the D-Day anniversary this weekend. And she finds the presence of American flags disturbing. Don't let people like this win. Don't let people like this set the narrative and write the history of our nation. You must keep the true story alive. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. We talk all the time on the show about language, how important language is in framing the debate properly. And it's equally true, maybe even more so true, about these historical moments in our past. These historical moments define who we are today, and they need to be framed accurately and properly. Just a quick point on the language, again, to go back to the first segment. The judge in that Second Amendment case that we highlighted a couple minutes ago, he said these assault rifles could just as well be called home defense rifles or anti-crime guns. Could you imagine if in the past 30 years or whatever, let's just imagine this. Imagine if the media was neutral or even on the right. And all these years, assault weapons were called home defense rifles. The entire debate would be different. Everybody's perspective on this issue would be completely different just with this one quick, tiny language shift. And the same is true of historical events as well. I've never heard, and this is not a good thing, but in my whole life, I've never heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre. I wish I did, especially as a history major and a history buff. I wish I heard about it. But there's something really odd going on when the media and Biden they've been obsessing over it. Just nonstop obsessing over it, talking about it all the time. I've heard it more. I've never heard it in my entire life. In these last 2 years, I've heard about it nonstop. And Biden spoke about it just the other day. Here he is.
According to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
Which is crazy. And he ties that into the Tulsa Race Massacre that was 100 years ago. Dr. Paula Price is here, who grew up in Tulsa. Dr. Price, how are you today, ma'am?
I am wonderful, but Mike, I have to say, I grew up in New Jersey, relocated to Tulsa in the late 1990s. I've been here 20 plus years.
Thanks for the correction, but you've been there long enough. Tell us why do you think Biden is talking so much about the Tulsa Race Massacre? And being in Tulsa now, what do people there think about the Tulsa Race Massacre?
Well, as with anything, mania or craze or not, your people are divided. And I have to say, I do appreciate it being handled. I do appreciate it being pulled together. It's a real event. It really happened. My concern is about Biden's comments and his attitude toward it, because in my mind, when I've researched this man, that kind of care and concern and compassion for our race has not shown up. So that tells me that there's another expediency at work. What that is, we can have an hour-long conversation to figure it out.
Where have you seen Biden not, as you worded it, care about our race?
Well, it's interesting. I was looking at, I stumbled on an article March 5th, 2020, and the heading by the writer is Branko Marcetic, who says, Biden has built a career on betraying Black voters. That's a common theme when you research this and look it up. And then I look at the intelligentsia, which says, will black voters still love Biden when they remember who he was? So that tells, if somebody can change that drastically, I am curious as to the motivation for such a change.
I want to pivot into like critical race theory and all these other divisive things, but what do we need to know about the Tulsa race massacre? Like what's important about it? Why is it important to know?
For my point, it's important for closure. In my mind, we have to close it because this is still hanging out there. But I have to tell you, I'm not a Tulsan by birth, but I was in the 67 riots. Riots always have some sort of incendiary device that is going to lead to a particular outcome. So my thought about it is that, yes, we should know it. My question is, when is enough enough? When is forgiven forgiven? When are we going to move from forgiveness into the next stage of closure? Or is this going to be an annual thing that benefits? We don't know. So yes, the riot did happen and it should be told, but it is not the only riot that has happened in America. I one time keyed in all of the riots that have happened in the United States and I was stunned. I was absolutely floored. I didn't know that many existed. So my thought about the Tulsa race riot, if this was the centennial, 100 years, are we going to go forward or are we just going to have another reason to rally around our sorrow, our pain, and our blackness again?
Yeah, it's just so brilliant about it's closure. And right now, clearly it's being used as the opposite. We're opening up old wounds and dredging them back up and trying to apply them to today about how we're no different. We're no better, Dr. Price, than we were even 100 years ago is how it's being framed.
Well, I was a part of a celebration that was, of course, not going to go the Biden train. And one of the things that I said as a speaker, and I will continue to say it, that this is not that. This is retro racism. In other words, it's borrowing our genuine past and using it for an artificial present to create of another future that's based on race. When you think about our country, there is nothing that defines us more than skin color. So if I want to have an instrument of division, if I wanted to have some sort of reason for reconciliation, I'm going to go with the obvious. And the obvious here is skin. So when we take skin off the table, what are we really talking about?
What should we be focused on, if not the obvious?
We should focus on what is an American. If we took skin off and we just put a bunch of silhouettes out there and say, this is the United States of America, we'd be forced to find out what unifies us instead of what divides us. If we blindfolded everyone and say, okay, let's pick out the Americans in the room, what would we use? Would we use our thoughts? Would we use our ideology? Would we use our height, our weight? Would we use anything that our visual self can't jump the gun on definition and division?
Yeah, so good. One of the progressive things today, these critical race theory people, is they say that America is whiteness, and they're trying to detach Americanism from being white. And it's so odd because I don't see that connection. Like, do you feel that connection that America equals white?
I will tell you this, I could say that coming up, I saw it. I can say that moving into the various professions and jobs and arenas that I moved in, I saw it. But I have to tell you right now, we need to sit down and redefine the melting pot, because the melting pot is no longer cream sauce. The melting pot has some potatoes in it now. We've got some meat, some carrots. We got different colors. And I think that kind of conversation needs to happen because we have become a melting pot. Now, we may not like it, or people might want to use it to their advantage, and obviously the minorities' disadvantage. But I'm for one to say, when are we as minorities going to grow up, own up to our part of the America we did contribute, and also acknowledge the things that we did have. We have amazing milestones that the United States of America as a collective inspired, motivated, and achieved. Right now, it's as if nothing happened. We're still Jim Crow. We're still, post-plantation. We're still not getting the vote, when in fact, that is not the truth. We are a new melting pot, and it's of many colors.
My last question for you, Doctor, is in this wonderful article you wrote in Town Hall, you said the problem, in quotes, the problem that never got addressed is that we were conditioned to fail. Can you speak a little more about that?
Absolutely. I'm one of those people that say I do not believe that the United States of America is racist any longer, meaning they want to cut us off. The country wants to cut us off. They don't want us to make any headway. They don't want, I mean, come on, Mike, I'm sitting here with you. All right. We're talking. I'm a black woman from New Jersey in the ghetto of the ghetto. That's where I came up, where you never saw a white person until you became an adult. And yet here I am talking with you. What I would like us to think about now is shifting the consciousness of our people so that the whole reason for us not succeeding is removed. If we take racism off the table, we're gonna have to figure out what else keeps black people from succeeding. If we take our color out of the way, then we're going to have to think about that. And I'm not just talking about myself. Come on, we just said goodbye to a black president. We just said hello to a black female vice president. That's a hard argument to sell in today's climate. So that means we have to look at another way. There has to be something else that we have to take on. Now, I will say this. I do believe that America is 100% race conditioned, meaning that a lot of the things that we're fussing about are things that are so deep in our subconscious, from mama's table, from what grandma said, from what we heard in the locker room and all of the name calling. See, a lot of that stuff is embedded in our souls. And if we're going to do something about the soul of America, we're going to have to excavate that conditioning and replace it with something else. Because we've had permissions, we've had laws, we've had affirmative action, we've had opportunities, we've got black superstars, black everything. Now, do we have as much as we want? Probably not. But let us not forget, we still are 13% of the population.
Dr. Paula A. Price, I hate I have to run, but what I love so much is that you and I have different skin colors. But who cares? We have so much more in common. You and I have so much in common. And that's a beautiful thing, and I want to celebrate and hope we can talk again.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Dr. Paula A. Price. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, this problem is starting to get more attention and good. I've talked to maybe 5 business owners or so who say they cannot hire anyone. They're ready to go. People are coming back, wanting to buy stuff. They can't hire employees. These employees would rather take unemployment and do nothing than work, make a little bit more, but have to work. I think people are getting used to getting paid by the government, more people than ever were used to that. Kevin Nicholson from NoBetterFriendCorp.com wrote a great article in The Hill. Biden opens the back door to universal basic income. Kevin Nicholson. Kevin, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you, brother. Yeah, man. So what is UBI and how long has the left been pushing universal basic income?
Well, if you look at, what it is, first off, is universal basic income. It's the idea that the government should be distributing checks direct to citizens in the country, unconnected to any type of work or merit or anything like it, just like pure socialistic redistribution of wealth. And where you really started to see it pop up in the United States of America was in the 2015, 2016, out of Silicon Valley. Really, you started to hear kind of tech oligarchs and business leaders coming out and talking about it. And what I think they were doing, it was a public relations effort, really, in an attempt to get out in front of the issue that automation that's induced by the products that are produced by Silicon Valley will eventually, in their view, displace Americans from jobs. So again, if you pick it, CEO of Twitter, CEO of Facebook, you could come out ahead and say, hey, look, I think we should also have universal basic income. That was their case. And now in reality, now you're seeing what happened with COVID, such that it displaced obviously many millions of people from work, sidelined entire industries for months at a time through poorly thought out lockdown policies, which probably had negligible effect on the actual spread of COVID. And what you see now coming from the Biden administration and also too from the Congress is an attempt to extend federal unemployment benefits, which are placed on top of state unemployment benefits for many months, at least through September of this year, $300 a month, and have that be completely disconnected from the normal principles of unemployment payments, which would say that you have to be in between jobs searching for the next job, and it's basically temporary and it's time bound. It's also a system that you've usually paid into in one way, shape, or form. So what I think is happening here, to be honest with you, is that the left is trying to induce universal basic income, or just the principle of it, or the economic effect of it. And by so doing, they're creating a wage floor. They're in essence creating a floor by which if you're not paying at least the amount the government is or more, you're not going to get people to work. And now you're talking about not just universal basic income, but the left trying to shoot for arbitrary targets on wages. For example, the $15 an hour wage that you heard often from leftist activists. And if you net this out, like, where does it all really go? And what's the real damage being done to people? Well, a couple fold. I'd say number one is that you're looking at jobs potentially getting automated that weren't going to be automated, or at the very least weren't going to be automated for an extended period of time. So the left, through their policies, through raising costs artificially for business of labor, might actually be causing these jobs to be permanently destroyed and lost. That's one issue. And the other big issue that we should all be talking about right now is that the Biden administration, through what they're doing, through spiking the cost of labor, and also to spiking the cost of energy, which they're doing both these things simultaneously, is absolutely going to cause inflationary effects, and already is. You see, like, price indexes, consumer prices up 4% over where they were a year ago in April. That's a real problem, and that can wipe out real wealth gains on the parts of millions of Americans.
The next crisis that will require, that they say will require more government involvement, even though they're the ones who caused the problem, of course. And I love this premise that I think universal basic income doesn't poll well, but unemployment does. So you're right, if they can just increase unemployment and make it permanent, and as you articulately said, disconnected from any other traditional bound that unemployment used to have, then boom, we got it. We got universal basic income. They're just not called that anymore. It's still called unemployment, which has already been sold to the American people. I think that's exactly right. Okay, what we know some economic issues with it, and we can talk about that another day. What are the societal implications of this? If we had a universal basic income where it's like maybe everybody just gets automatically $20,000 every year. Just boom, everyone has that floor that it's enough to just scrape by, survive on. What does that mean for our country?
Well, you're asking a great question, right? Like, yes, we can talk economics all day, the inflationary effects, the destruction of real jobs in permanent time, and we should be calling the left to account on all of that. But then I think you're right. Take a step back and say, okay, we're in a republic founded by free people and basically led by free people. We elect representatives of government for a short period of time to do the business of government. We hold them accountable. We kick them out when we don't think they're doing a good job, et cetera, et cetera. Well, how has that whole premise changed when the government starts to issue checks to people directly? Again, untethered to work, untethered to merit, to any kind of merit-based justification for a payment. How does that start to change the relationship between a people, a free people, and a government? I think it fundamentally changes it. There's no two ways about it. And that's a real issue. And I personally believe, and I know, and I think we all can use common sense, the proponents of this policy, of the idea of UBI, absolutely know that. And they understand that fundamentally you will change the relationship between the American people and their government in a way that can't be changed back if, to some degree, a large proportion, if not the entire proportion, is some way, shape, or form dependent on a check that will come to them from their quote-unquote elected representatives. So as you see these ideas coming from the left, to be sure, in politicians and elected officials and bureaucrats, but also coming out of Silicon Valley and such, it just reeks of a trap that's being set to get people to fall into line. And it's just socialism played out again and again. And it's fun for the left to thumb their nose at accusations of socialism. But I mean, boy, you really can't get much more blatant than making the case that the government should be making payments to people unconnected from creation and value.
And most people are going to fall for it. Kevin Nicholson, NoBetterFriendCorp.com. Kevin, appreciate your time, brother. Thank you.
Mike, thanks for having me. Look forward to speaking again soon.
Let's do it again. Yeah, man, the left, they will push this and push this and push this. And I don't know if it's 5-10 years from now, but they will get their way unless you stand up against that. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.